Welcome back to Firepower Threat Defense and Access Control Policies. We're going to continue on with creating our rules. So when we left off, we had gone through security intelligence, talked about HTTP responses, most of the advanced tab. We added some categories, or a category, I'm about to add another one, and put some rules in it. We also discussed that when we get through the rules, we end up at our default action down here. Chances are we won't get here, because I'll put some rules in here before here that would stop all packets. But if not, we have a default action to catch. It's a catch-all here in this case. And it is a permit IP any, and we'll see that when we get to our console. And this is a security over connectivity. This is an IPS policy created by Cisco that we're using for now. We'll change that later. So once we come in and hit the pre-filter, security intelligence, we hit our rules. So in this case here, UDP, DNS queries, we're using our zones inside to outside, and we're looking at UDP 53, right? Just what is the IP address of lambda.com, IBM.com, whatever. And it's an allow rule. So if it matches this, it's not going to see the next rule, but it will be inspected on its way out of the egress. Now, stop web advertisements. On this one here, I used a URL, Cisco's URL object, and that's a block with reset. The other one, I don't want them to know I'm blocking it, so I just use a regular block. We're just going to drop them silently. We're going to try to stop all torrents or peer-to-peer traffic. So we actually stopped more than torrent, didn't we? We did some other peer-to-peer categories in there. Then we logged all traffic, in this case, monitored all. So let's go ahead now and add another category. In this case, I'm going to say corporate URL rules. Now we can use a couple. Notice I have the below, right? And I could put it above, into manager, or wherever. That's exactly where I want it, though. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. Again, the categories do nothing. They don't make them more special. It's top down. It's just for administrative purposes. Come down here to the bottom, my corporate URL rules. If I just say add rule, it says, oh, I'm going to put it in the new category created by default. There it is in the category. Again, we can change it into default or mandatory is in there. But notice in here, insert into mandatory default category. Now we got the above and below rule. So this will become important. But right now we're just going to put them as in here. So I'm going to say, in this case here, we got some basic URLs. If it's come from the inside to the outside zone, right? And we're going to allow this. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this, but I see this, so I'm just going to explain it. I see this a lot. You know, a lot of times you'll see things like allow, IT, let's say that the corporate rules are, hey, block all social media, stuff like that. We'll see some allow rules in there for the people that are creating these rules at times, right? But let me give it a better example here. Allow marketing to social media, okay? So that's probably a good example right there. In this case here, I would, in this case, use the AD. That would be the best way to go. We just can't do that yet. So I'm going to come under here, and I'll go down here. And if I don't have the object, I do have one, but I could create one here, right? Object or group. I'm going to say if the source is marketing. And we're going to destination, we could use applications or URLs. If I have a URL filter, I'm going to use this. The application can do the same thing. It's just you have to do it by hand. Let me show you. So I'd have to type in things like, Facebook by hand, and then Twitter, then YouTube, whatever. I don't really use it, so I don't know all those other than those three really. But notice all this stuff under Facebook here. There's a lot, right? And we could create an object out here, and we can't create it here, to create a filter, right? And then use that as an object. But in this case here, I'm just going to use URL, and I'm going to say, click on it. So I'll go to URL, click category again, and then type social. And social network. Now I could say, in this case, I'm going to do an allow. So I'm just going to leave this, and I'm going to go ahead and log it at the end. The ones that I see that the IT group aren't doing it, they don't log it. But in this case here, we're going to log this. And here's the deal, though. If there's traffic coming in and out, you want to inspect it. Now, we haven't done the file policy yet, but we could use a Cisco policy. The problem with using the Cisco policy is what? Remember, I told you at the beginning, we can't stop it from dropping traffic. In other words, if it was a false positive, it's going to drop it. Right? That's the reason we create our policies. But in this case here, I'm not going to allow anything out without inspection. I'll just use this medium one, make it more efficient. For now, we definitely need to change this. But for now, I want some security. I would definitely add a file policy to this eventually as well when I create that. No traffic should be uninspected, right? Some people allow some traffic out uninspected, but we're not going to. Now we're going to go ahead and do the let's block everybody rule. Okay, so we're just going to do a block. In this case here, we can do a block with reset. We don't care that they know the TCP reset is fine. Stop all social media. A couple different ways to do this. Oops. Try that again. And I could say from inside to outside is fine, but I want to stop it from coming in as well, not just from the outside. I want to look at it in both directions. So in this case here, I could use networks, but I'm going to basically just leave it as an any rule, right? Everything's any. Sure, let's just do that. Any zone, coming from any direction, any networks, right? Any VLANs users, not being used right now, applications, ports. Now, we'll go ahead and use the URLs again here. And then I'll type in social here again. Click on that. Now, remember, if I'm going to say, hey, we want to stop most social media, but not all of it. Most of the time, I don't hear that. But we could hit the 4 here. Now, we're blocking 1 through 4. But again, I could do this. If I made this an allow rule, right? Now we're allowing 4 and 5. Just the same results, basically, pretty much. I wanted a block rule, though. I'm going to block, but I want to block it all. But you have those options. And we definitely are going to log this. And you can only log the beginning because there is no end. There's no end. We can't do inspection or anything like that. It's dead anyways. So there it is right there. So I'm allowing marketing, right, by using their VLAN object now. But we really want to change that to AD if possible. It's an allow rule, which means if it matches this, it's done. It's not going to go to the next rule. This one here, we have an any rule here. Now I want you to be careful here for a second. I'll actually give you the example up here on the web advertisement one, because we're not logging it. So I see this a lot. If I'm not logging these rules and someone does this by accident, and they go to the URL and they click this and put it here, but somehow it didn't get in there, and they click save and they don't see it. But what is this rule now? Well, this is the deny. This is a deny IP any, isn't it? Sure it is, and it's not logged. No inside host would work. You'd be able to see DNS, right? Queries going out though, right? Nothing would get back in. So you want to be careful here. I'm giving you a great example up here because when this occurs and I come under here to go, I'm not getting anything in that analysis connection events, which is my main table from my access control policy events, right? That's what my logging goes to. I'm not going to see anything. I'm not going to see any logs. I'm not going to see anything. So it's going to be tough. So be careful here. It's a bad mistake if you make it. And this one was what was that? Stop web. Okay. Now I'm going to make sure it's in there because now it's not a deny IP any, it's only deny web advertisements. Okay. So we want to be careful when we have denies that we make sure that we have some sort of variable in here. Now, the other thing I want to do is say, the boss says, well, they can watch some news, something like that. And I'm like, okay. So we're going to say we're going to not allow news. I'm going to say allow, watch this, some news, right? Now, if you put an allow here, it's going to match this and go on, and they're going to be fine and be stuck there. But what I want to do is an interactive block. They're going to go out there and say, hey, you're going to a non-work site. And most of the time, guys, I don't get these. It's block everything non-work site. Let them get on the guest wireless is how they use it, right? So we'll see things like that. But in this case here, this is good for us. We're going to allow some news, interactive block inside to out. That's fine. I'm going to start the session from there. Again, I can use applications. I can type in the news sites by hand, right? If I didn't pay for the URLs, then that's the free way to do it. So under URLs, though, I can just type news, and there it is. Now, one of the things that we could certainly do here is not allow all news sites. They can't go to, say, Russia for a news site, whatever, right? Some bad, what we consider bad. So basically, we're interactive block 1 through 4. They can only go to well-known. That might be something you can consider if you're going to have to allow them to go to some of those, right? In this case here, I'm going to choose any just so it'd be easier for us to get logs. Now, I'm absolutely going to inspect this. And I'm going to get the beginning because it's an interactive block. I want to get the session set up. But the other thing is, I can only inspect on an allow rule. However, if it's an interactive block and they hit, yeah, go, I know it's not a non-work site, but you said I could go, then it becomes an allow rule, doesn't it? So you bet we're going to inspect it with an IPS and file policy. Very important. So there we are. Now we have our news interactive block. Again, I don't see that a lot at work per se. We usually just block everything. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. I created some objects, or will create some objects, because in this case here, we're stopping all social media allowed, and these are some great examples here. But a lot of times I'll get these URL rules where they say we don't want any sites that are not, work sites on our corporate network. They can use the guest wireless, right? They can do anything they want on that, or sometimes they'll stop streaming video or something like that. This is an example of what I see as a business requirement, a lot of my customers. So if I wanted to meet the business requirements of non-work sites not allowed, I can do something like this. There's a couple different ways to do this. I can come under, let's actually go out to objects here and go to application filters. This is a way. I'm saying pick anyway. I'm pretty sure I went over this in objects as well. Non-high risk sites. Now I can do this, can say, hey, we want to do all these applications out of what Cisco's list here. And if the risk is high and very high, and the business relevance is low and very low, right? Now it's not saying block or allow because it's just an object. We don't know. So I'm going to save this. This is a way to do it. It's not necessarily bad, but I could have easily have come under applications here and done the same thing. However, it wouldn't have been an object. Right? In this case here, I'm going to have an object in here. So now I have this object here and I could use it. But I could have just come here and chosen it and put them all in here. I just like to create an object if possible. So I'm going to say block. Actually, in this case, I can do block with reset. Stop non-work sites. And absolutely, we're going to log it. Absolutely. And we're going to do everybody. Okay, and that's going to go at the end, and that's fine. So basically, we wouldn't really need this social media rule in here because it would be blocked down here. But remember the way that we did it in this case here, I'm not blocking everything here. Those social media sites in this object would be allowed, as we'd see. However, it would block a lot of stuff. So this is a way to do it. If you have some rules that say, block social media, block this stuff, allow some URLs, and then this one will block high-risk sites. This is a way to do it. Now, there's some other ways to do this. If I was to come in here and not do it via application. Now, in this case, I wouldn't need that other rule for sure, that social media one. So I'm going to come under the URLs. This is a way to do it. This is tight. This is tight. I'm going to say any. Now, there's a lot of uncategories, there's a lot of URLs in there. In other words, when we go to analysis, we'll see the category. It's social media, it's news, it's peer-to-peer. How Cisco sees the categories. Now, they see the categories through something called Bright Cloud. I'll show you that as soon as I'm done with creating this rule. But those categories are in here. And if I was to choose any, they have 80 categories here. And notice I can't do any, but I could say, all well known, this is going to be 1 through 5. This is a way to do it. It's going to block a lot. It's going to block a lot. We're not sure what it is right away, but we can find out. The other way to do it is say, no, I want uncategorized, right? And notice I can't put that in here when I have the any. So the thing is one of the things I could do is take this out, choose uncategorized. I think I can put 50 of these URL categories in a rule and create a couple rules to get them all in there. That's a way. But this one's going to work real well. This one's going to work very well. And it's going to be tight, right? You'd have to test this to see. I'm not getting anywhere now. So let me do this. So now we have allow So here's my corporate URL rules. And maybe you can do this last one. It's something you'd seriously have to test. If they're like, no, we don't allow anything, then you'd want something like that. There's a couple different ways to do this. But wait, there's more. If you were to do this, I highly recommend doing this. I'm going to come under here to my URL lists and feeds, and I'm going to create a list here and call it good URLs. Good URLs. Okay. Actually, I just need an object to be able to put something in. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here, and I could put in a list. This is a way to do it. And now in this list would be URLs that we can't get to, but we need to because of that object. So I go ahead and just create a text file, and I'd add in lamley.com, which should be in every list, every good list, right? I'd say new, take the list and then put that, open, upload, and then save. And now I would just go out to that text object and add. Now you find out this is going to be important because now I can create a rule that's going to be allow under networks here, under URLs. Sorry, that's where it is. We'll see it, should see it, and URLs. And there it is right there, good URLs. Now I'll add this to a rule. This is a way to do it. There's a couple different ways, but this is a good way to do it because you just have to update that text file. Now, why would you want to do this? Because there's sites that people need to get to that aren't considered non-work sites based on what I just showed you. That's going to be blocked. And you're going to get some kind of weird things, like people will get to a site but not to a sub page on that site that they need to get to. So it'll be good, but some of the other stuff will be blocked. If there can be some issues with creating that object like I did and blocking all non-work sites. So what we do is we create a new rule, good URLs, right? Now, definitely going to inspect it, file an IPS policy. Definitely we're going to allow it though, because this is going to be before. So I'm going to watch this. So into category, I can do this. This is going to put it at the bottom and I can drag it up, or I could have just said there. So watch this. So now I have good URLs here because this is going to go out and block something like maybe where your certificates are. I've seen that issue. I have some banking places where they can't get to the pages to download something from the government that they need, right? So what we did is if you're going to do something like this, you're going to want to create some type of rule up here that people can add the URLs in. Now, there's one other way to do this, but what I showed you is most efficient because now someone just goes to that text file and adds in those URLs that you need to be permitted. And then you do have to update your access control policy, save this and update your access control policy for it to get those new URLs. But the other way that's not quite as efficient is we can come back here to URLs again, and we could create objects. This is a way to do it, and say, lamley.com. And then the URL is *lamley.com. And now I would create an object for every single website, and then I would add that into the group, and then the group is in here instead of a list. That's not necessarily a bad way to do it, right? If I had that. So if I came up here, I'd do it from here, URLs, and I'd create, there's my thing, and then I would put all those in. So then you come in here, you add the new ROU object, add it to the group, and redeploy either way. Okay, so now let's go back here and add another category. So we cancel out of this, and let me come into add a category now, because we have our corporate default rules, our URL rules, and then let's add a new category. And this one's geo rules. Yes, below rule 8 is great. Category. Into mandatory. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's where I wanted it. So, oh, I see, because I had a 9 there and it was saying below 8. Okay, gotcha. So here's my geo rules. Now remember, I had created an object. Hopefully it's still here. A lot goes on these, and it's still gone. So let's add that object again. So what I want to do is call. I usually don't call objects good or bad, but in this one, because I want to do now. If you're in one of these countries, I'm not calling you bad. Just that my experience here with some of my customers in the United States is we only work in the United States. I don't need anything from other countries, right? So in this case here, we could see that we can click all of these. Now, the one thing is I do seek attacks coming from Antarctica, the continent of Antarctica, and most people don't know there's three countries in Antarctica. And you see these attacks because people are using those source IPs, right? So in this case here, I'm going to click on that. Asia, I'm just going to click them all, right? Now, once I click them all, what I want to do is take off, let's say I'm in Africa, or let's say I'm in Australia, or somewhere in Europe or Russia or something. But in this case here, I want to come in here and I could take off things, like Canada, right? Like, say maybe they have something in Canada. Had British Virgin Islands, had some people in Dominican Republic, right? So kind of depends, right? But you have a choice. Now, you can't do this by city, right? Or even state here, or you can only do this by country. So I definitely want to undo the United States or it's not going to work. So I come through here and I basically click them all. Now most people can't do what I'm just doing because we go all sorts of places all over the world to get downloads and stuff. That's fine. But let me show you how to deal with that. So now I have my object here. I'm going to call it bad countries. I should probably name it something else, be more PC, but I don't mean anything bad by that. Anyways, add rule. If I was in some banks, credit unions that are in a state. They don't even go all over the United States, and so everything to them is bad outside that state. Now, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this two ways. Because I'm going to create session. If it's going from inside to outside, I'm creating a session, right? I can do a block with reset this way. Okay, stop geo into out, right? Stop geo into out. Now, I'm going to then come to networks. Now, the reason I created out there, I cannot create the object here that I created here. I could click all these countries by hand. It would just take a lot of work. So this is a little easier. If the destination, right, is some of those countries, then we're going to block it. Right? Block with reset. No inspection. We're definitely going to log it and see who's doing what going out there. Now, this will allow someone to go out, create a session, and stop them from creating a session to the outside. You might not be able to do this rule because there's things you want to get. So you might only be able to do this rule. Let's watch this. So I create this two different ways, and this one's just going to be a block. Stop geo in from outside. Okay. And I'm going to do a block, and I'm going to say if it's coming from the outside zone, if the session's trying to be initiated from the outside, and I want to go to networks here, geolocation, and if the source, right, from the outside is that, definitely going to block it and log it. Now, this is a stateful firewall, so the fact is that if I was to not have this first rule, then I'd be able to go out and they'd be able to get back in and respond, which is why I have both these rules, right? I have two rules here, inside to outside, outside to inside. So, and once I can do a block with reset on this one, I don't want them to know I'm blocking here. Now, you may not be able to do this one. I try it, but here's your problem. You're going to come in and a lot of stuff has failed, like Microsoft updates, Adobe updates. Now, there's a way to fix this. You can either I can come in here, and what I would do here for our class here or the video series is disable this rule for now. And I'm going to do that, or I'm going to not get a lot of attacks because I do want attacks, right? Now, in this case here, there is something I can do after this rule or before this rule if it was state enabled. In this case here, I'm just going to say, hey, anyone from the outside trying to get initiate a session to the inside and they're from one of these countries, we're blocking them, right? That's a good rule. Now, in this case here, what's this though? I can come under here. So what I can do is I can do an allow updates. And I can put these in. So I'm just saying this is a way if you wanted that rule still enabled, and I can come under applications. I think we can do that through URLs to take a look, but the problem is you won't know what's in that. And I could say updates and see what happens. Up. So now we got some, and I could look at for like Microsoft updates. I can create, so if I said Microsoft, that should be able to do it. Access, auto update right there. So let's say that was an issue, and then I could go on and look for Adobe, Adobe and stuff. Those are the ones, and here's why. Because you can't say, oh, I see that update. I see it coming from, UK, right? The next day it comes from China. The next day it comes from Russia. The next day it comes from Brazil. I mean, it's all over the place. All of them are. So what you could do is put this in here and say, hey, we want this. We're going to allow this. We can inspect it or not. You could probably, maybe I don't want to log that. And plus it's an allow rule. I don't have to have that monitor rule. But what I could do is say above rule, above rule 10. I think that's right. We'll find out. Yeah, 10 is right here. So I add that if I can. Oops, no logging. There we go. Now, it didn't do it, it put it below it. But now, look at this. So now I've got some geo stuff, inside to out, and I can enable this. So I would only have to do this top one if the top one was enabled. This one, number 11, was enabled. And then I'd have to put in my updates in here. Or you're going to have some problems. This is a way to do it. I'm not saying you have to do any of this. I'm just giving you guys all examples. Okay, there's some great stuff though. Now I'm going to create one more thing before we hit our IPS policy. I'm really going to use it for the future. I'm going to put it in the mandatory. Allow all, inspect all. So now I'm basically going to have a permit IP any rule at the end, but I'm going to inspect it with my IPS and file policy, neither of which I have right now. So here's my category, so I know what it is. It's my catch-all. The default action would never be hit. So in this case here, I'm going to say allow all into category. Okay, that's fine. Inspect all traffic. If it's and it's an allow, nothing's going to get through there. And then I'd come in here and we'll add. I'll just go ahead and put this one in for now, but I'll add my IPS policy and my file policy in here. We're going to say, hey, everything can get through, and we're definitely going to log it. There we go. Say add. And now I have basically my permit IP any. This is kind of like this. The problem with this last rule here is it can't do the file policy, which is why I add this rule. If you could do it there, then I'd just say, hey, let's use the default action. Okay, this is great. Should I go ahead and save this and put it out, and then we'll have security? Not really, because I can't get into my inside network. I don't have NAT, right? We don't have the pre-filter. We don't have NAT, so nothing's getting through my router anyways. So in this case here, I'm just going to save it. But now we got to get to our next sections, which would be our pre-filter, right? We got to create our pre-filter, what we're going to allow in, and then with our layer 3, 4 rules, and then create NAT, and then my ACP is going to give us some serious security. And now that I saved it and I did deploy it, so we can see the tasks, right? Good health, deployments, all looking great. What we want to do now is take a look at the access list. So let me do this, show access list. I'm also going to take out the remarks. There's a lot of remarks in these, right? So that's a heck of a lot of rules here, right? It looks like. You can see that most of this is remarks. Now, up until, let's take a look here. Let's start at the top. Oops, not that far. Right here. Right here is my pre-filter. There's the default rule in the pre-filter is allow all traffic, but inspect tunnel traffic. So that goes to right here, right? So we can see that we're looking at tunnels. There's 41 GRE. This is just basically my default access control policy. Allow all traffic, inspect all tunnel traffic. Now my ACP could be a little harder to read, but notice that all our rules aren't in here, right? We have to see what's cached inside here. So the fact is we can see there's my UDP DNS queries, the first rule, permit UDP, interface inside, interface outside, object group DNS over UDP, and then here's a permit UDP inside outside domain. So these two rules are that first rule. And the other thing that we can see on here is the hit count. You can see I'm getting some hit counts from something already, but basically very little. The next one, see, kind of hard to read this. Here is my rule for stop web advertisements. So permit IP any. So notice, remember, I didn't put any zones in here, unlike this one where inside to outside. And then the rule ID. So we kind of have to, the remarks in this are important because it's kind of hard to read via a rule ID. And then here's in the mandatory again category, allow marketing inside. So this one was permit IP any source coming from marketing to outside, right? And then we can see right here that rule is, and that object was 30, right? Wasn't it? So there's that one, okay? And then we have our next rule under the same, lots of remarks. I'll take this out in a second, and we'll see that this gets cut down to about 10% of this. Allow some news, and here's the rule, isn't it? Permit IP inside to outside, any rule. And then now there's my geo rule, stop geo in, right? We're not seeing everything in here. Show access list, exclude remark. This is going to be a lot smaller now. There, that's pretty good. So again, we can see that here we go. This is my pre-filter. And again, we're going to look at pre-filters next. If you're following along, that's what we're going to head in. And now it's kind of hard to read these, isn't it? If we didn't have the remarks on what these were for. So we can take a look at what we have in here after that. So we're going to come back and use this show access list again. If I was to do a show raw, oops, that's not it. Hold on. That's with remarks in it, right? There we go. And we can see it in this way, same way. We'll see it screen by here. And this is another way to look at it, albeit slightly less efficient, right? So pretty much the same thing. This is a way to look at it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come through here. We'll do our pre-filter, then we'll come back and take a look at the access list again.